Hello everyone, Charles Watts here, the Arsenal correspondent at Goal, joining you on a pretty gloomy Monday morning. Unfortunately, it's been that way for the last few Monday mornings, actually, after Arsenal have played. It's probably not going to be the most upbeat of videos today, I'm afraid to say. I'll just get that warning in right now, but I still thought it was time to pop on and go over in a little bit of detail exactly what happened last night against Wolves. Sort of delve into some of the issues that are perhaps affecting Arsenal at the moment and contributing to this poor run of recent results, and try and maybe bring a bit of realism to the situation as well, because a lot of angry Arsenal fans out there at the moment. I can see, I've got my Twitter open right now, I can still see the constant supply of messages coming in and replies to various things that I've put up in the last day or so. I thought it would be a good time to pop on and just go over a little bit deeper into what happened last night. I'm sure you've probably seen it by now. If you haven't, my player ratings video is down there from the Emirates last night. As you can imagine, not too many high scores in that one. And I did talk quite a bit about the game, so I'm not going to go over it again in so much in terms of what I covered in that video, but just certainly thought I'd talk about some of the big talking points. We'll start with Raul Jimenez, obviously get this one out of the way early, because Wolves has issued an update on Jimenez at the moment. I'm sure you've probably seen it, but they have revealed he has fractured his skull, had an operation last night. He's said to be stable now. He's comfortable, they say, following an operation last night, which he underwent in a hospital in London. He has since seen his partner, Daniela, and is now resting. He will remain under observation for a few days while he begins his recovery. So positive news that he is stable now, because that was a really sickening moment last night. I was pretty much sitting level with where it was, and I have to admit there was a medic who ran up the stairs next to me talking to another medic, and she said straight away fractured skull. Well, literally within a minute of him getting treatment down on the pitch, so it must have been pretty apparent what the issue was. And this noise, I think I'll remember the noise for a long, long time. It was so brutal. You knew something was serious had happened, and it was a pretty brutal incident. And just fingers crossed, Raul Jimenez is going to come through that all right and come back stronger, and can get back playing again as soon as possible. In terms of David Luiz, obviously we saw he stayed on. Arsenal coming in for a fair bit of criticism for that. Not surprising, really, given the state of him afterwards. Blood was still coming out of his bandages. They let him play until half-time before replacing him. Robert Holding, Mikel Arteta spoke about it after the game. He said it was a really tense situation because of the collision. I had news from David that the doc made all the tests and followed all the protocols to make sure he was fine. He responded really well to them, but it was a nasty cut. David wanted to continue, and he did continue, but at half-time we decided to take him out because he was uncomfortable heading the ball. So I think the issue here is not with Arsenal, it's with the protocols, because I just don't see how David Luiz was allowed to stay on that pitch last night. I thought it was really, really poor. You can't be in a head collision like that, one that's clearly still affecting you so much that blood is still pouring from the wound, and you're allowed to stay on until half-time. Just really did not sit right at all, and I can understand why a lot of people feel the same way as I did. I know he passed the protocols, so technically he was allowed to continue, but I think then you got to have a look at the protocols, because the protocols aren't right. That it was just, you got to take player safety into account for me, and I just felt the whole thing just looked really, really poor. And the fact that he was allowed to continue till half time and then they took him off, it just didn't make any sense. It was almost like they were treating it like an ankle knock. It's like, I'll get him to half time, we'll see how it goes. You can't do that with a head injury, not one that sustained, the impact that sustained, that we all saw, that we all heard, and didn't sit right really with me with that one. But fortunately, it seems like David Luiz is okay, and fingers crossed Raul Jimenez will his recovery goes well and he'll be back playing football as soon as possible. So in terms of the defeat, obviously it was a pretty bad one again. It's a real struggle watching Arsenal at the moment and trying to find some sort of rays of light. Mikel Arteta is certainly coming under pressure for the first time since he's come to Arsenal. I think you've got to kind of look at it for me, because there's been a lot of sort of comparisons between Arsenal under Emery and now Arsenal under Arteta. Emery was obviously sacked a year ago yesterday, but I still think Arteta is a fair way off getting into that situation yet. The decline under Emery lasted an awful long time. It started at the end of his first season with that dreadful collapse, and it continued into his second season and was allowed to go on for far too long. This is Mikel Arteta's first slump since he came to Arsenal, really. And it's only really been 5 games. After 5 games of this season, they were looking pretty well placed. It's only been since then, with the losses to Villa, Leicester last night, the draw at Leeds, obviously, and they did have the win at Man United in that, but it's just a 3 home defeats. Those 9 points have gone begging that have really made this season look like it's been such a dreadful start. And it has been, the points tally doesn't lie, but I still think he's way off being in that situation that Unai Emery found himself in. I mean, Emery's one lasted over the course of 2 seasons, the back end of the first season and the start of the second season. He couldn't even win in the Europa League by the end, and it was just, I think Mikel Arteta is still some way off that, but he's got to find a solution to these problems that Arsenal find themselves in, because he doesn't, he's going to find himself in a difficult situation very, very soon. He can't let this drag on for another 5, 6, 7, 10 games. This run up to Christmas now is so important to Mikel Arteta, and he has to find a solution to the problems, because the way Arsenal are playing at the moment, they don't look like they're going to win any game other than the Europa League, but then you've got to take the competition into account, who Arsenal play, and once they get in the Premier League, Arsenal don't look like winning, they don't look like scoring, they don't look like keeping clean sheets anymore, and he has to find a way. He was asked last night, Mikel Arteta, are you worried about the sack? This is Arsenal's worst start to Premier League season after 10 games ever. 3 home defeats in a row for the first time for a manager in the league since, I think, the 1970s for an Arsenal manager. So he was asked, is that something that concerns you? He says, it's something that the day I decided to become a coach, I knew that one day I would be sacked or I would leave the football club. I don't know, it will be the day I sign my contract, in a month's time, in a year's time, or in 6 months. So I never worry about that. My only concern is to get the best out of the players, give the best possible service to the club, and become better and better. I know one day I'll get sacked, I will leave, but I don't know when that is going to happen. So Arteta is saying he's not concerned about getting sacked. And I don't think, like I said, he shouldn't be concerned yet. That shouldn't be an option for Arsenal. He's only having his first bad spell. You've got to remember, since he's come in, he's beaten Chelsea, he's beaten Man United twice, he's beaten Liverpool twice, he's beaten Man City, he's beaten Wolves away. He's won the FA Cup, he's won the Community Shield, and he inherited an absolute mess. So he still deserves a fair bit of time yet, Mikel Arteta. He's nowhere near that situation that Emery was in. But having said all that, he needs to start finding a solution, because I think the most worrying thing of the lot at the moment is you're going into games just thinking Arsenal are going to lose, because they don't look like winning anything. They don't look like scoring goals. They're not creating enough chances. Defensively, they're suddenly poor again. The midfield is looking just as it was under Emery, and that is the real worry. And Arsenal will obviously go to Spurs on Sunday in the North London derby. Spurs top of the table. So it's not going to get any easier for Arsenal. After that, they then have Burnley and Southampton at home. And you're looking at those fixtures as if he doesn't get something, if he doesn't avert this slide by then, suddenly heading up towards Christmas, and he will be under real pressure. So in my view, I still think it's far too early to talk about Mikel Arteta losing a job. He's done too much since he's come in to be in that position yet, but this is football, it's based on results, and this is Arsenal, and so you have to start winning, and he has to start winning soon, because you can't continue in a run of form like this. The big issue, I think, for Arsenal, yesterday was it was perhaps no surprise that it looked like an Unai Emery team at the end of Emery's era yesterday, because it effectively was, apart from Gabriel and obviously Willian on the right, 9 of those players, it was basically Emery's team. You had the same midfield that struggled so much under Emery in Partey and in Ceballos and Xhaka, because there was no Partey, there was no El Neni, and that midfield is just not good enough in the Premier League. Arteta managed to get a tune out of those two last season playing with a back 3, but last night, as you were playing with a back 4 and you had Xhaka and Ceballos, it just doesn't do enough. It's not good enough to play in a Premier League game with a back 4, because it offers nothing going forward. Look at the second goal, the way Xhaka gets turned, and then suddenly Wolves are in at the back 4, who are having to back off because there's no midfield in front of them to offer them any protection. It's just not good enough, and it doesn't offer anything going forward either. So it's just, Arsenal can't win games in the Premier League with Xhaka and Ceballos as a midfield 2 for me, against certainly with a back 4. I think when you've got back 3 and you have that extra line of protection and defence, you can at least keep things a lot tighter than they did last night. But he can't do it with a back 4. So losing Thomas Partey has been massive. You sort of look at that game at Old Trafford when you had Partey and El Neni in the midfield, and just how much better it looks, not just defensively but going forward as well, with Partey striding forward, linking the midfield and the attack. It just looked a completely different team. It's Arsenal's best performance in a long time in that win at Old Trafford, and losing Partey has been massive, and for me the midfield is the major problem. And yes, when you're playing with the same players that you had last season in that midfield, then you're always going to struggle. You're not going to get results because it's not good enough. It doesn't work defensively and it doesn't work offensively, and that is big issue. And so for me that is the big problem. And unfortunately with Thomas Partey, it doesn't look like he's going to be back anytime soon. I spoke to Mikel about it and I asked him, and I said, he's shown he's a key player. How can you cope without him? And he said, I don't know. I don't think he'll be back with us in the next few games. We're missing a lot of players. Don't want to use the excuses, blah, blah, blah. And so I asked him then, what is Partey's injury more serious and was first feared? Because Partey's people, and I know this for a fact, that initially they didn't think it was going to be that bad an injury and they thought he could be back pretty soon. But I asked Mikel, was it more serious than you first thought? And he said yes. So he's basically certainly ruled him out of the North London derby there, unless he's trying to play a few mind games, and that is an issue for Arsenal because Thomas Partey, we've already seen how transformative he can be to this Arsenal team, and if they're going to have to be without him, certainly in the build up to Christmas, that is not going to be ideal at all, because I've already had my say on that issue, because the midfield is the big problem for Arsenal, and it was last season and it will be this season if Partey isn't in it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, he's not going to be out for too long, but we'll have to wait and see. But at least El Nenny's back now, and I would certainly get El Nenny back in the side for the Spurs game on Sunday. To be honest, I'll go with back three against for Spurs as well. But I'll get onto that in a video later on in the week, I imagine, as I start building up to that Spurs game, because we have Rapid Vienna before that, remember, in the Europa League. Hopefully, the Europa League has been quite good to us at the moment for forgetting about the troubles in the league, all just for a couple of days anyway. Hopefully it'll be the same, although I'm sure he'll play the kids on Thursday night rather than risking any of the senior players. One player who certainly won't play on Thursday night is that man behind me, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and I just wanted to sort of end today's video and today's look back at last night's game with some words about Aubameyang, because I have to admit, yesterday was the first time I generally started to worry a little bit about Auba and his form and his general body language around the place. I thought it was really poor last night, Aubameyang, on all levels. There was a couple of moments where he could have got himself in the box and on the end of a couple of crosses. There was one in the first half, I think it was Kieran Tierney's crossing, and he was behind the defender, but he just almost gave up on it rather than anticipating the defender might miss it or something, and the defender did miss it. And if Auba had been alert and he'd been just busting a gut to get in there on that ball, he could have scored. I'm sure he could have done, but he didn't even attempt it, and I thought that was a real worrying sign there with Aubameyang. It must be pretty demoralising for him at the moment because he's not getting many chances. But you're the captain, you've just signed your new contract, you've got to do everything you can to try and drag your teammates out of this mire and lead by example. And he's spoken a bit about that in his last couple of programme notes, how he's trying to work on that. But I didn't see any signs of it on the pitch last night. I saw a player with his head down, with his shoulders shrugged, and just not really putting in, didn't look like it, putting in 100% effort, and that is really worrying, because Arsenal need Aubameyang. They need him to start scoring again. He's not even scored at home yet this season, only 2 goals in the league, 1 a penalty, and it's not all his fault, obviously, because he's not getting many chances, he's not getting too many supplies, but I still felt last night he could have got more out of that game if he'd have really put an effort in to get into the box and get on the end of a couple of crosses that came in, and he just didn't do it, and I thought that was a little bit worrying. Mikel Arteta was asked about Aubameyang during the press conference afterwards. He said, it's a formal worry. He said, I think we are all worried because the main goal scorer of the club at the moment isn't scoring goals, so my biggest concern is how to help him score more because we need his goals. How important Auba has been for this club in the last 2 years and how the goal sheet has been shared among the squad tells you his importance. He needs to be scoring goals if we want to be successful. Absolutely does, and so Arsenal do need to help Aubameyang. They need to find a way of creating more chances for him. There's no doubt about that. But I think in these times when chances are at a premium, he has to be alert and he has to be working doubly hard for if a chance does pop up in the box. And last night was the first time that I really started to watch him and think he's not putting everything into this, and that was a worry for me. And hopefully it was only a one-off and he just wasn't on it last night, and he'll be back to top form when Arsenal play at Spurs on Sunday. But he did worry me a little bit at Auba last night, and he needs to make sure he's on it because Arsenal need him, absolutely need him, especially when they're in this sort of form. Right, that's about it for today's video. Sorry, I did warn you at the start. It wasn't going to be much fun poring over that defeat last night and the problems that have arisen for it. But hopefully, fingers crossed, look, November's out of the way. Look, we all know Arsenal in November, it's just a miserable month for Arsenal. Always has been, dating back to Arsene Wenger It's just been the lowest points tally I think of any month is always November for Arsenal, since the start of the Premier League anyway. And so that's one good thing. Arsenal don't have to play again in November. Next game's December, and we can start to focus on Christmas and hopefully have a little bit of an upturn in form as we head towards the festive period. Thank you for watching, everyone. Please do try and forget about Arsenal for a bit and enjoy your week. And I'll be back throughout the week to bring you some more videos. And head over to goal.com for all your latest Arsenal news.